Since I wasn't going to do any more evaporative cooler testing, one thing that came to mind that I thought might be useful is going through kind of a buyer's guide of what to look for if you're wanting to purchase an evaporative cooler. First thing is the environment. Specifically, what type of environment do you plan to use the evaporative cooler in? What to aim for if you're going to use this outside. So that means you're outside, the unit's outside, and you want it to be blowing on you, cooling an area around you outside. That would be aim for really low relative humidity. I'd say less than 40%, ideally less than 30%. The higher the ambient temperature, the better these things work. So if you're in the desert Southwest, where there's very high ambient temperature but very low humidity, these work best. These actually can produce a cooling effect greater than a single stage refrigeration-based air conditioner. That's for outdoor use. For indoor use, there's a couple of different factors to consider. One is, do you already have an air conditioner in your home? Are you using like a central air HVAC system, and perhaps there's a room in the house that is warm, or you're trying to reduce the dependence on the air conditioner and perhaps have it cycle less frequently? Or are you looking to use this because an air conditioning is broken, or you don't have an air conditioner and you want to try to cool off an area with this unit? I'll start with no air conditioning first. So if you have no air conditioning, the conditions for when you would use this in an outdoor environment kind of also apply to that particular indoor environment. That is, you want to really have low relative humidity in the area that you're in, both outside your home and inside your home. To have a moderate to high level temperature that you're trying to bring down, or at least affect a particular area in your home, apartment or condo, whatever the dwelling is, to bring an area of that down to a cooler temperature. If it's a coolish temperature, 75 degrees or so, and you're trying to get it down to 68 or 65, this isn't going to work, because the limitation of their cooling efficacy drops off significantly at around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's if you're using this in an area where you don't have air conditioning. If you're in a situation where you kind of have average relative humidity, that's somewhere between 40 and 60%, and you have moderate to high level temperatures, then this could still work very well for cooling up an area of your home or the overall home, just to help reduce the runtime of the air conditioning, but it requires air conditioning. It really would help then control that humidity so that it doesn't go above 60%, especially if you're using more than one of these in a home with more square footage than, say, about 800 to 900 square feet. If you're in an area where you have very high humidity, and I would say that in the Midwest, we're kind of in that area, not as much as down in, southeastern United States, but we do have periods where the humidity does get quite high. And this unit, when I was testing it, and all the evaporative coolers, they just don't work. Once you get above 65% relative humidity, they really don't work anymore. They'll put out air. The air temperature will be about the same as the air temperature coming in, but you're adding moisture to the air. You're always adding moisture to the air no matter what relative humidity you're actually at. But the lower the relative humidity is, the less it matters. You don't notice it. Your body doesn't really notice it. But when you get into that 60% and it starts to climb above that, you really start to notice it, especially if the temperature is high. In that situation, these work best to augment the air conditioning. The two situations that I've really been using these for, and I have three of them. I have this one, the Arctic Air Pure Chill Not 2.0, and two Basin evaporative coolers that I got, I think those were last year. And the three of them, depending on how hot it is outside, I'll either run just one of them or two, or if it really gets hot like it's been, I'll run all three of them. What the air conditioner is configured to do, because I have designed my own thermostat, is that it runs in more of a dehumidification mode. I mean, it's still cooling. It's not just a dehumidifier. It's still cooling the air, but it's really for humidity control. When it's humid outside, it really helps draw the humidity out of the air. And as it draws the humidity out of the air, it's pulling that moisture that's absorbed the heat and then cooled the air, and then the air gets dried out. So it saves quite a bit of money on air conditioning costs. And I have a very, very inefficient air conditioner, and we rent, so we can't really do much about that. They do work in that application. The other application that I've tested it extensively in is when in the area that I'm in, occasionally we do get hot days where the humidity is very low. It's 25 to 30%. It's actually surprisingly dry. I've been able to test this and get amazing results that those that are in, at least in the United States, again, just using that as a reference, in desert Southwest, or just in the Southwest, or even a Northwest where it may get really warm periodically and the humidity doesn't get very high. If you're in an area with high relative humidity and you think you're going to get 3 or 4 of these and your air conditioner has stopped working, you're not going to meet your expectations. It's just not going to be able to keep up. Not only keep up with the heating load, that's what the BTU per hour cooling power, so to speak, is, but also you need to get rid of that humidity in some fashion. For those that live in the desert Southwest especially, that use evaporative coolers that are whole home coolers, well, the ones that are portable, the plug-in AC powered high air volume units, those actually, they recommend you keep your windows open, or keep some windows open so that you can push air through the house that can remove the humidity and then keep some of the cool air in. And it's kind of a process of it cooling the air down, but also then removing the humidity out. You don't want the humidity staying in the house for too long. That's another point too. If you are in an area where you have very low relative humidity and very high temperatures, it might be more cost effective and advantageous if you're looking to use evaporative cooling technology in place of an air conditioner to get a, I would say portable, but I don't mean portable as in like this portable. I mean like a roll away, high air volume. Same principle, same technology. They definitely work. It's just much higher air volume. And if you get above 65% relative humidity, if you're in an area where it's consistently very high humidity, then I wouldn't recommend getting one of these. I would encourage looking for another solution, a portable air conditioner. Even in the window unit space, there's so much improvement in window air conditioners that you can get units that are very efficient. Third option that I would say is, again, in very high relative humidity, is that perhaps a very powerful fan to have air blowing on you if you're in a situation where you're in high humidity. This is not going to improve the situation. In fact, it may make you feel hotter than just having a fan blow on you. What's the summary of all this is just be aware of the environment that you're in. Are you in an area where it's quite humid outside? Is it humid sometimes? Is it not very humid? Do you have access to an air conditioner, be it a window unit, central air? Are you trying to augment the air conditioning to save energy, which these do a very good job at doing? Plan your decision accordingly. The next thing that I would say to consider is filters. And this is a bigger piece. And to me, it's one of the areas where it can be effortless to use to the point where it becomes frustrating and may put you off to using evaporative coolers because of the type of filter that it comes with. The first one that I've seen is this treated paper mesh, and that was featured in that basin, another basin one that I tested last year. Those I would not recommend purchasing one that has those, and you can usually see it in the product listings as like a honeycomb looking lattice thing that looks cool, but doesn't actually work very well because they're not easily cleanable. And if you have hard water, they're going to get scale and build up on them. It's hard to find replacement filters, although maybe in some of them you might be able to retrofit a standard evaporative cooler filter, like the filter media that's used in the large whole house portable evaporative coolers. They generally use that paper woven mesh, but it's a much better material than what's being used in these inexpensive evaporative coolers. It's important to note that the treated paper mesh is probably the closest to what actual evaporative systems use. It doesn't seem to me like it's best suited for these portable units. It's important to note that it can mold much more easily if not thoroughly dried out. And the performance that I've seen so far and the one that I've tested is not great. So the second one that I would avoid seems to come in the form of a cartridge that has some sort of exotic material in it. Now there's primarily one company that I've tested. It was Evaporative, that makes a lot of claims about these cartridge style filters. And while they work and do provide cooling benefits, and there are many, many claims about its anti-mold, fungus, mildew, bacteria, those material claims so far have not been substantiated or proven through any sort of testing outside of in-house or suspect third parties. In my testing, the longevity of these filters, although they claim long life and durability, they don't seem to work well at all in any sort of situation where you have hard water or softened water, and they seem to start to mold even though they say they don't. There are some filters in the really inexpensive coolers that will have the same shape as one of those cartridges and say that it has exotic materials in it to prevent mold and bacteria and all that stuff, but in reality it's just a very inexpensive paper. There's a video that Technology Connections did where he was challenging whether or not these evaporative coolers even do anything. And the one he was using looked like it was the filter out of an Evaporative, but it just had a few little pieces of paper in it, which that's not going to do anything. So agree with him on that, but not that evaporative coolers don't work. Watch out for the ones that have a cartridge. They look like the ones that are the more expensive cartridges, but actually it's just paper, and I would just stay away from those. The third type of filter is a washable fabric pad, and that's the one I'd recommend. That's these guys. This is the best compromise between getting really good cooling performance and actual longevity of filter or fabric pad or whatever you want to call it. The material might be slightly suspect because you don't really know what this is made of. It seems like it's most of the time this stuff is cotton. I've seen ones that came with the basin that were cheaper and they held less water. It seems like they use perhaps a polyester or some kind of blend, and it may not absorb water as well as cotton. They're way more durable than any of the other two filters that I just mentioned. They're more susceptible to mold and mildew growth if you don't dry them out completely and you don't periodically wash them. But the awesome thing about them is you can stick them in the dishwasher on the top rack. That mitigates any sort of mold or mildew buildup as long as you're doing that periodically. And if you get scale buildup on it, which this one has a little bit of scale buildup from hard water, all you gotta do is just soak it in some vinegar and water, dissolves that buildup, and the filter is good to go again. And so they say 3 to 6 months. I've had them last longer. The two that I've got are going on their second season, and after 2, 3, or 4 month cooling seasons, I'd probably replace them. But that's much better, much more life to get out of this. If you have really very hard water or your water is softened, it might be advantageous to use distilled water. And if that puts you off because distilled water is expensive, which I can totally understand to purchase it, I'll be doing another video on that later about ways to mitigate really hard water or soft water with systems like this. Finally, the fourth one isn't a filter at all. It's just no filter. And there are units out there that are basically like misting fans, and that's fine. Depending on where you're intending on using it, a misting fan might be better for outdoor use. In fact, if you're really looking for something outside that's going to give you the most cooling benefit for the least amount of cost and the most amount of area, is perhaps a misting fan over something like this, because you get much more airflow volume and much more water flow as well compared to this. I think they're around the same price depending on what size you get. If you get an industrial grade one, they're going to be way more expensive. Generally speaking, the ones that I've seen that are in this class, this portable battery powered $40 to $50 class, they only use the ultrasonic transducers with no filter. So the ones that use ultrasonic transducers without a filter, they generally have poorer performance than those that have some sort of evaporating media. As I've said before, like a second stage of cooling. It just evens out the cooling performance more than just having ultrasonic transducers. Now, if it's a misting element, like if it's just a nozzle that's misting with like a pump, or just using municipal water source that's got 60 pounds of pressure behind it, it's misting water out of that, that's different than like an ultrasonic transducer. I'm talking about something that there's no active pressure behind it, and it's creating modulation to atomize the water. The third thing to consider is how is it pumping the water into whatever it is using for cooling. In this particular case with the Arctic Air Pure Chill, it's using an ultrasonic transducer to serve two roles. It acts like a pump because it puts water down onto this filter that then evaporates, but it also by itself atomizes water into the air. The ultrasonic transducers, they aerosolize the water into vapor, which is cool, literally and figuratively. But hard water or water that is not clean can release those minerals and vaporize it into the air. If you're in a well-ventilated space, and if you have other means to provide cooling, like your air conditioning, the example I gave with running it to augment the air conditioning, then the furnace filter or just the act of it running through the evaporative coils in the system generally trap that and remove those from the air. Or they'll just settle out of the air, onto the surfaces of your house, floor, carpet, whatever. There are ways to reduce that if you're particularly sensitive to it. I'll get into that. It's going to be another video. The other option is capillary action, which is used by Evapolar and the cheap ones that mimic Evapolar, it seems. They just have treated paper that's in there that works like a humidifier does, where you have a wicking filter that sits inside of a pool of water and it wicks up using capillary action. I would avoid those systems. It's so easy to get mold, mildew, just like you would see in a cold mist humidifier that uses a filter like that. That's not to say like don't use cold mist humidifiers. I've used them before and they're fine. I don't use ones that have like a variable humidistat. I just let it run. and run until it's empty, dry the filter out, refill it, that sort of thing. And generally, as long as that filter has air flowing across it, it minimizes mold and mildew buildup. But for these sorts of things where you might turn it off or it's on battery power or whatever, it's non-continuous use increases the chance that that might happen. So I would stay away from the capillary action ones and look toward the ultrasonic transducers or some other kind of pumping mechanism that's active as compared to capillary action. Hard water also can clog those filters eventually, making them less effective if they're only using capillary action. The fourth piece is, what does the fan and ducting look like? Because the more airflow, the better, right? You want to watch out for fans that look really big. They might have a big fan shroud or something that looks, and you look at it and go, oh, okay, that's gonna move a lot of air, but then they don't actually do that. The fan motor doesn't have a lot of torque, or the blade pitch isn't very aggressive or whatever, and doesn't actually move air in a directed manner. Something like this Arctic Air Pure Chill actually is kind of the better design because it has a duct in it, where the fan sits here and it blows through some sort of enclosed environment to force the air through the mist and then the water-soaked media to help evaporate in a kind of directed manner. And the ones that are ducted like this are generally better than the ones that are unducted that have larger fans, with exception, because the air is being directed at the things that are providing the means to evaporate water, which then cools the air. If it's just like an open frame fan and it's kind of blowing out through something that's it's very shallow, then you're gonna get some air from the fan that's missing that spray or mist, and you're not gonna get the cooling effect. You'll just get whatever the ambient temperature air passing from the intake to the exhaust of the unit. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.